Hi, and welcome to the Neuro Network Essentials podcast, where we explore topics related to neurodivergence and the adult experience. My name is Erin De Assis. I am a special ed teacher, an author, a leader, and a researcher. I've spent my career as a public special education teacher, and in more recent years, I've been a school leader working with special ed teams and student support teams, and working with teachers to really help build systems that are more sustainable. We know that public education is exhausting, and there is so much being thrown at teachers. And so when we can create sustainable systems that are intuitive and easy for people to recognize, easy for teachers to use, we're able to support students better. And so that's really been at the heart of my work for the past couple of years in special ed. Now I am taking all that I've learned in those decades, and I am now the owner of Creative Systems for Education, which is a consulting company for the neurodivergent experience. I work with families, I work with schools, I work with adults and community partners, and really just helping to support the neurodivergent experience of the person that we're supporting at any age. My main focus for the business is K-12 families. That's an area of need that I know from doing decades of special ed that is not being supported to the level that families and students deserve. And so that was a big part of my shift from being in a school building to wanting to really widen my scope in terms of families that I can support and how I can support them, knowing all that I know coming from schools. Now, why this podcast? Why do I want to do this podcast as well? Because this is a really important part of the neurodivergent experience is all of us adults that had a variety of K-12 experiences, and probably many that were not helpful. We did not know a lot about neurodivergence and learning differences, even 10, 20 years ago. And there's a lot of us out there that had very negative and difficult school experiences. And it's, unfortunately a product of what we understood as a society back then. And we certainly know a lot more now. And there's still a long way for us to go. And I say that to be hopeful and also realistic at the same time. There's some societal beliefs that we have and hold on to that are directly mirrored in our schools, and they affect the experiences that neurodivergent students have. And so for us adults, we might have gone through K-12 schooling not even knowing that we had a learning difference, and yet feeling very defeated in school, feeling criticized, and not having the learning experience that we deserved. Some of us might know or had been identified in school, but maybe didn't quite have the supports that were appropriate, to what you needed. So this podcast is so important to me because that niche of the adult experience of all of us who are walking around now, having had these K-12 experiences decades ago, and we're trying to navigate everyday life. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about neurodivergence, even today, unfortunately. And that's a huge part of what I want to bring to this podcast is all the information from neuroscience and understanding the nervous system that helps us to understand neurodivergence better. Because what often happens has been my experience as a person with neurodivergence and also being in special education for K-12 schooling is we have a lot of social concepts that float around and make character assumptions about people based on their neurodivergent condition. And this is just not okay. It's not only not okay because it's hurtful and not helpful, but it's not accurate. And neuroscience and understanding how the nervous system works tells us a lot about what's going on with neurodivergent conditions. And this information is something that I think is vital to adults out there who are navigating everyday life right now, and relationships and jobs and even parenting. This podcast is for any adult navigating the neurodivergent experience, but for many adults, they are also parents. And research shows us that there is a genetic component with neurodivergent conditions from parent to biological child. And there's a lot more to it than just that. But when we understand that, what that tells us is there are neurodivergent adults out there who are parents who now have at least one child who are navigating a similar condition. And so if we as adults with neurodivergence have not been given accurate information, have not had an affirming experience, how are we going to be able to support our child in the best ways while they are now navigating a new K-12 schooling? In some ways it's improved, and in some ways it probably hasn't since when you were in school. So, we're needing to move all of those things and shift the needle in a positive forward direction. And part of that is increasing awareness, improving the education out there, like getting the accurate and best information out there to the people who need it. And adults with neurodivergence are a huge part of that story, a part of that narrative. And I feel very strongly about it. And I think it's life-changing. I really do. And I'm very excited about the research that's out there. And I think just some dots need to be connected so that you have access to that information and can really make a shift. Because when we base the neurodivergent experience on social concepts alone, which really are just what society decides is true, and that doesn't always mean it's accurate. We believe a lot of things as a society that are inherently harmful, yet as a culture, we hold up those expectations and they become true because we treat them like that, right? So when we look at neurodivergence through a frame of social concepts and character assumptions, it is not helpful. It's not flattering, and it's not going to help us move things forward for adults with neurodivergence and ultimately our newest generation, our children with neurodivergence, for those of us who are parents. So this podcast is, I hope for it to be many things, but definitely awareness, education, and inspiration at the core. That is really the mission of Neuro Network Essentials. And, as it unfolds and I get information and feedback from, viewers and things that are in the comments, certainly that will inspire other episodes and information. But at its starting point, I want this to be a place of accurate information that is research-based and is giving you, the adult with neurodivergence, the best information to help really transform your life. And I don't say that lightly. I truly believe that. And it is what all of us with neurodivergence deserve. And those who love and support us, because this can be a place for people who love and support neurodivergent adults as well. So I want to make that clear as well. So just explaining a little bit why the name, Neuro Network Essentials. So neuro, of course, neurological, neurodivergence, right? It's a brain-based learning difference, right? And so knowing that not only are we talking about the neuro aspect of neurodivergence, but this is going to be centered on the neuro aspect in relation to neuroscience, because I think that's a huge part of understanding neurodivergence. And then network. This is from the research of Dr. Lisa Barrett Feldman and her work on networks of the brain. She has some incredible books out there, How Emotions Are Made and 7.5 Lessons on the Brain. And so I highly recommend her work. And a central component of what she talks about that is so directly tied to neurodivergence is this idea of the brain making networks. And her research is trying to get us away from the idea that this place in the brain does this and this place in the brain does that, because the brain is so much more advanced than that. It's not just like a simple map. And that also shows kind of how much we still have to learn about the brain. But she talks about networks and the idea that neurons that fire together wire together. And when they are encouraged to be fired, right, the neurons keep growing. And when they are not being used, those neurons prune. And so our networks, especially our core networks that develop from like age 0 to 7, that's kind of the foundation of what gets set into motion for us. And this is a huge part as related to neurodivergence, because I'm coming into this and the information that I share is based also on Dr. Gabor Mate's work His one book, he has many excellent books out there, but one is Scattered Minds, The Origins and Healing of ADHD. And he talks about this concept of neurodivergence. He's talking specifically about ADHD, but in general is a reflection of a highly sensitive nervous system. And what happens to a highly sensitive nervous system when it is bombarded with chaos and stress and trauma, especially in early developmental years? And what we are seeing as or naming as traits of neurodivergence are truly, in many ways, states of the brain. It is a state that the brain is in and oftentimes kind of stuck in a loop. And that's this idea of networks that Dr. Barrett Feldman talks about, is these networks are just what your brain is used to firing, right? Your brain is, its job is to keep your body alive. And so it's trying to save energy as best as it can. And the great news about that is we can help to heal our nervous systems, and we can build new networks. We can create new networks that are much more functional and helpful for us when we understand kind of the root and the etiology of neurodivergence. And neurodivergent conditions are different from one another, of course, but they are under the umbrella of a learning difference and understanding what impacts a highly sensitive nervous system. And that is really a key component to what we will talk about on this podcast, and really central to the current research out there on neuroscience and the nervous system. So that's the network part. And then essentials. I thought that was really crucial to have in the name, because essentials are tied to a social justice phrase that you might have heard, which is, what is essential for some is still good for all. And a great example of this that everybody can understand is the cut curb effect. And that is, anywhere in neighborhoods or cities, especially at intersections, you'll see where the curb is cut down to zero entry. And this is for people navigating life in wheelchairs. And that is essential for them. If a person in a wheelchair does not have those cut curbs, how are they supposed to navigate sidewalks? How are they supposed to catch the bus? It's made that much more difficult without a cut curb, right? So they're essential for people that are navigating life in wheelchairs, but they're good for everyone. Think of how many different functions and uses a cut curb helps anybody with. People on bikes, people pushing baby strollers, people carrying suitcases, anything on wheels, really. And the idea that when we take the time to cut those curbs and do what is essential for some people, we are still doing something that's good for everyone. And so I put that out there, that this podcast is something that is essential for some. It is essential for adults with neurodivergent conditions, but it's good for everyone, because who doesn't need to learn more about their brain and their nervous system? And who does not need to find strategies for regulation and calm in all of the chaos that we are navigating right now, especially right now? I mean, life has been chaotic for a long time, but right now is a very overwhelming moment in time. And everybody needs some strategies on how to regulate the nervous system, because when we can do that, we are improving our health, because a dysregulated nervous system is not well. When we are living in a state of chronic dysregulation, our body, our brain, our mental health, those things are not well. And so understanding what's going on in the nervous system when it's dysregulated, understanding the parts of the nervous system, these are all things that are essential for the neurodivergent experience and good for everyone. And so that's really why I felt it was a crucial part of the title that I wanted to promote as well, is that because it's the same in a school, right? I mean, that's a big thing that I promote when I've been doing special education and working with general education teachers, is what is essential for some of your students is still going to be good for everybody. And so thinking in that way helps us to get off of, well, I have to do this thing for this one person or this one student, instead of, wow, I'm going to put this essential tool or strategy in place, and then I'm going to see it benefit all of my students, and all of my students are going to be aware. And I would say the component to that that's also very, very important from a compassionate standpoint is, when we create things that are essential for some and good for all, we are promoting a community of inclusion, because we are helping to explain and helping others to understand why this thing or strategy is essential. and how it's still good for everyone. It raises all of our awareness in terms of understanding what those things are, what those essential strategies are, and it just makes for a more inclusive community all around. And that's that social justice part of neurodiversity. Neurodivergence is understanding that there are differences, and how do we embrace those? How do we provide appropriate supports to people? And how do we make everyone feel included? And that's, what a beautiful society we are moving towards when we are thinking in those ways. So to wrap up, I'll just say that I am very excited to begin this journey with you. It has been many, many years in the making, and I'm excited to see it unfold and look forward to getting feedback and comments from the community in terms of what are other topics and areas of interest that we can explore. Thank you so much for your investment of time and effort to learn more about neurodivergence at the Neuro Network Essentials podcast. Till next time.